listening to the Debug Podcast.
Hey, you listening to the Debug Podcast.
Hey y'all, you're listening to the Debug Podcast.
So, thank you so much, Laila, for being here today and engaging in this conversation. Ana Ramirez, I'm an organizer with Silicon Valley Debug. And to kind of get into today's topic, we really wanted to focus on highlighting the critical work that Participatory Defense Hub have been doing across the state of California. And so we have invited Laila Aziz, Director of Operations at Pillars of the Community, which is a community-based organization out in San Diego, to join us today. I do want to share a little bit about Pillars of the Community, and if you would like to add anything else, Laila, please let me know, right? But Pillars of the Community is grounded in Islamic faith, and it's also an organization that is truly focused on countering the criminalization of Black and Brown people in Southeast San Diego. There's a lot of programs, as I kind of was able to, see through the work that you all have been doing in community building, civic engagement, as well as policy. But today, in terms of thinking about, the work that Pillars of the Community has been doing, we will be just focusing on discussing the People's Tribunal that Pillars of the Community hosted back in January earlier this year, where the community came together to bring light to the charging and also sentencing practices of the District Attorney Paul Finks in San Diego County. We know that the tribunal specifically is focusing on bringing the district attorney to the table to look at robbery murder cases during the time of 1995 to 2003.
Yes.
It was clear, too, that, through that tribunal, there were racial differences or disparities in charging as well as sentencing practices when it came to these types of cases. So I'm really looking forward to what you have to share, Laila, with us today in terms of how Pillars of the Community came to hold this tribunal, and also looking at what are some of the solutions that the community envisions to undo some of the harm as well as address the racial injustice. And so I do want to transition it to you, Laila. If you can share a little bit more about yourself and how long Pillars of the Community has been supporting folks in San Diego through participatory defense, if you would like to add more.
Sure. My name is Laila Aziz. I work for Pillars of the Community. Thank you for the great introduction on Pillars. So basically, yes, we're decriminalizing the people that live primarily in Southeast San Diego. And Southeast has the highest level of parolees, one of the highest levels of probationers, one of the highest levels of poverty. All those things come hand in hand. So I came to Pillars in 2017. And we became a participatory defense hub in late 2017. I wasn't trained until early 2018, I believe. So how that happened was one of our organizers, family, he's been a part of Pillars for a long time, before myself even, Alonzo Harvey. He went to the training and he comes back and he's like, oh my gosh, this was the best thing ever. So I was like, wow. So I started attending the meetings and we began hosting them at Pillars. And it was a collaborative of many different organizations, not just Pillars. And we still look at it as a collaborative. Even bigger than the collaboration with organizations is the ownership of the volunteers and the community members who are closest to the pain. And we try to ensure that we're keeping that amplified, and we don't change that from the beginning of the work that we've been doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Laila. And in terms of diving deeper into the conversation, right, of how is it that you all came to hold this People's Tribunal, I want to start off with perhaps you sharing a little bit more about what was the motivation behind investigating this question on how communities of color were being charged and also sentenced in robbery murder cases in San Diego.
Well, we've always known this anecdotally, qualitatively, right? We just didn't have the evidence, the numbers to back it up. Those of us who have loved ones in prison will tell you that there's rarely any young white men who are in prison with sentences that you see young Black and brown men in prison for. Also, some of the folks that I've worked with from the API community and this whole model minority thing that they do to the API community, when we looked at people that were in prison, a lot of times they were serving very harsh sentences from the Asian community also. So those anecdotes that we kept hearing, we wanted to really look at the evaluation and the evidence behind it. And that's one of the biggest parts of a campaign that we've seen from Martin Luther King. When the first thing you do is you look at the findings and you see what's going on and you're able to prove that. So California has something called the California Public Records Act. It's similar to the Freedom of Information Act. They call it FOIA on the federal level. In California, when you look at the data, it's just a CPRA, California Public Records Act request. And we began to request that. I requested the data. I want to say the data I requested that data back in 2017, a long time ago, even before we knew what to do with it, because I was always afraid of that 10-year, they can get rid of files at 10 years. And so even though sometimes you don't know why you're doing some of the things you're doing, and there's different reasons for that, depending on your belief system. But that data that we obtained was initially requested in about 2017.
And what did the analysis highlight? I know that, that's been a large part of the People's Tribunal. So can you tell us a little bit more about what did the analysis highlight through the data?
Yes. So initially, when we began going through the data, there was about 450 cases. It might be a little bit more. And it was a needle in a haystack because we were looking for 18 through 25-year-olds who were sentenced based on felony murder and what the sentence was, and separating them from the actual killer and the supposed killer of each of those, right? Because you have the SB 1437 that came before us. You have the Racial Justice Act. A lot of that came from our work with Debug, Silicon Valley Debug, and going for the Racial Justice Act training. And during that training, Ceci told us that basically the most traction, and she's told me this also through some of the counseling that you guys do with the hubs throughout the state. She said, Laila, we're not getting a lot of Racial Justice Act 3 and 4. We're seeing more of the police profiling win in the courts. We're not seeing a lot of the racism within the statistics winning and the similarly situated. And Ceci actually worked on the RJA, both of the bills. So she knows these very well. So I'm like, okay, what can we do in San Diego to help with some of the issues that we're having that we know exist? And we're looking at the denials. How can we prove this? And so that's where that came about.
Yeah. And in terms of, the practices in charging, right? And also when we talk about sentencing, what were some of those patterns, right, that you were able to highlight through the People's Tribunal?
So the first thing was figuring out what was going on with the data. As we looked at the data, we looked at it on multiple levels. So the first thing we did was we wanted to see if they did an appeal. First thing we did, we wanted to see what their name was because we only had case numbers. So we wanted to get the name, we wanted to get the date of birth to make sure they fit in the 18 through 25. And then after that, we want to look at if there was an appeal. And if there was appeal made, we can read the appeal. We found early on that in the appellate courts, they don't have the PDFs to all the appeals unless they're pretty recent. And so we weren't able to pull the opinions, for the appeals. Then we realized that the guys who are in prison on their tablets, they have LexisNexis for free, which is it cost. And so we were able to then work with the inside organizers to pull in prison different cases that we couldn't see to see if they fit into our scope we were looking at. Then we were looking at, of course, race, which wasn't always easy to tell. So on race, we dealt with looking at Google. We dealt with like running Google searches, Ancestry.com. When we find the name and we narrow it down to who the individual was, who their family was, and we looked at mugshots, and then finally the public defender's office assisted us with race, and we kind of were able to look at both to make sure we were correct, and we were correct pretty much. I think we were 99.99% correct on the race after we had done what we did. And then we started seeing that some of the people, when we read the appeals, the co-defendants weren't even in the appeals. And so we're like, well, why isn't this person not in this PRA that we ran? Why isn't this person existing there? And so we started pulling their files. We had to pull files from storage, from both the appellate courts and the trial courts to look at what was going on. And we saw different areas and different junctures in the criminal injustice system where people were charged differently. So we had people that were never given a special circumstance, even though it was felony murder. You have robbery there. We were looking at robbery specifically and where the murder comes, right? There was never a special circumstance charge. They never were even facing a special circumstance. And we didn't find anybody black that happened to. Everybody black got charged with a special circumstance. We're like, whoa, right? Um, and then as we started looking at different junctures in the data, from charging to plea bargaining to sentencing, it got more and more astronomical for these similarly situated individuals. As they went through the court system, there was safety nets. Protective factors were in the court system for young white men. By the courts, the prosecutor, the judge, those protective factors were never there for the young black men. And we felt that that was really telling
Exactly.
on who is redeemable, who is able to be rehabilitated, and who is human.
Exactly. It does show too, right? Like a lot of the legwork that it really took to be able to show, right? Because I think we know these things, but in the society that we live in, right? Like being able to get the data in order to really tell those stories and like you said, like humanize them too is very, very important. That's amazing that you all took that amount of time to like to be able to put this together. And so that kind of brings me to like to my next question. In thinking about the People's Tribunal, how is it that Pillars of the Community came to hold this People's Tribunal and why? I know that you've talked in previous spaces too about really like there's a lot of intentionality as to how you even came to this point, right? So if you could tell us a little bit more about that, that'd be good.
So I'm reading about the Attica Rebellion. It's a very condensed, scholarly, intellectual, radical book called Tip of the Spear. And as I'm reading it, I'm still not done this book because as I read this book, I'm always sent on a mission of figuring out how to take the intellectualism and put it on the ground to direct action, right? Put it on the ground to movement building, to power building. How do I do this? So I'm reading and way before, I'm not even at the Attica Rebellion part yet. I'm looking still in the book on the work that was done pre-Attica in the jails of New York. And one of those things were the tribunals and how they were governing themselves in the jails for safety, for fairness, and different aspects that many of us who do prison work know that in the prisons, they create a safer environment that we can duplicate in our communities to keep people from going to prison. And so knowing these things and looking at this, I started looking up this tribunal, this community courts they were talking about in this book. And it sent me down a whole different direction. And it sent me down looking at Ireland and Bobby Sands and the work that the Irish People's Tribunal does. It got me looking at the Black Panther Party and the People's Tribunal community courts they did around eviction. I found a great picture too of one of their tribunals. It really sent me looking, and that's a lot of the great things about when the research is done, you see the areas of solidarity of different groups of people working together or working in separate areas that can assist other people either later on or at the same time. And so I saw that Vietnam probably was the first tribunal for some of the war crimes done against the Vietnamese by the United States government, including biological warfare. And I said, this is a really good idea because we're not winning in the courts right now. So how do we strengthen and get what we want to say out there and lay it out and have the community decide, is this okay? And where do we go from here? And so we did our first tribunal. We marched up to the district attorney's office. All of these investigators are like following us around because they're cops, right? So they're like, see us, like we don't belong there. What are we doing on the DA side? What's going on? It's a group of about 8, 9 of us. And we march up there and we go and we demand to speak to the district attorney. So the second in command, Dwayne Woodley, and they know Pillars. Somebody in court every single day. And we're always amplifying the injustices that they do in court. So they're like, what is Pillars up to now? And we have a subpoena. The same thing that they use on us to make us go to court when we don't want to go to court. And also on top of that, we had a complaint. The same thing they give to us to complain and tell us all our charges in this complaint. We use their system in certain aspects because we knew they understood that. But also we were taking it out of the courts and into the community, into the people's hands, into the power. Okay. And so we laid out the names of the people. So we gave them in the complaint the names. So we almost gave them discovery too. Story defense, get the discovery. This person is white and they committed a robbery. We're not charged with the circumstance, special circumstance. This young man was black, did it, was an aider and abetter, was charged and given life without parole. So why is that? So many young white men were saved and so many young black men were told that they could never come home again. And the district attorney said, I'll send somebody there. Then he said, I'm going to send a chief. And a chief did. That chief that went happened to be, because Pillars started with gang work. So the
Yeah.
chief that went there was the old gang chief of the district attorney's office. So he goes in there, the gang chiefs, they're a whole different kind of breed. They get to do what they want to do. It's almost like, special operations, nobody's looking, torture, kidnapping, whatever you want to do, you can do to get the job done. These are dirty people and they're already dirty. They're dirty.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So he's,
Yep.
he's doing his professional thing. I'm not playing with you, man. Shut up. No, you don't get to talk. The same way you use process and procedures to ensure that our voices are not heard in this criminal injustice system. We're going to show you how we're going to do this. And we're going to lay out what we're going to do. And we want to know why. Of course, he says, well, I don't know. You were a DA back then. How do you not know? This was before our time. You were a district attorney during this time period. Your the head district attorney, Summer Stefan, is actually one of the prosecutors on some of these cases.
Mm-hmm.
But because you weren't in leadership, you guys want to blame it on Paul Finks. Okay. So what are you going to do about it? Because these cases are coming to you and you're fighting them. And that's where we are now.
Yes, and so in thinking about that, like the stage that you are in now, um, and I want to kind of like reference like what you have been saying, right, Leila? Like the community was really engaged at the People's Tribunal, right? Like engaging with the discussion, especially too, as you were sort of like asking questions to, pointing to the mugshots that were around the room, right? Like asking, what do you think they got, right? And a lot of the times it's like what you said, like Black men were getting LWOP sentences, the special circumstance, having to spend their life in prison. And so in thinking about the dialogue, the engagement of that night, can you share a little bit more about what does the community envision in terms of, how do we undo these harms, right? And I know that Pillars of the Community has sort of like pointed out different solutions, but can you share a little bit more about that?
One of the things that we're looking at is the district attorneys, because they do have a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
District attorney is they're not overseen by any type of other bodies. They're an elected official. So it's problematic dealing with it. This tough on crime thing is back. We saw that happen in Los Angeles. We saw it happen even in San Francisco. People, and they vote this way, so they can say what they want to say. But as long as their Tesla window is not being broken, they could give a damn about Black and brown bodies.
Yep.
Period, point blank. And they can pretend it's something else, but that's what it is. As long as they don't have to see the person that can't afford a house as they rent their home from their generational wealth built on the backs of Black and brown people, as long as they're able to get 4,000 or 5,000 a month for it, knowing that they're capitalistic parasites, it doesn't matter. We're seeing that, okay? On the streets, we see it on every level in the communities that we serve. So as we're fighting this mess, it's basically when we come up and these guys come up with their SB 1437s, with their Racial Justice Act motions, you need to submit based on the Racial Justice Act. You need to submit based on institutional racism. And you need to relook at these cases. When they ask to be resentenced by you, and it's nonsense that our district attorney sends out saying we don't resentence life without parolees. But I have cases that you have. And I ran a Public Records Request Act on that too. And when I say that, running a public, the biggest part of the work, the research, that's a lot of people at Pillars. That's a whole team of people. And then to have a well-established media company go behind us and independently review our work and come up with the same conclusion. I'm so appreciative. We're not asking for preferential treatment. We're asking that the truth comes out. We're asking that people really look at what happened and how we got where we are now in the prison system looking like it does. And so one of the cases, the first one since the tribunal, and I hope I'm not skipping any of your questions.
No, that's perfect.
There's a change of venue. There was a change. I don't know if that's good or bad. We are in new terrain. I know that having a change of venue has always been a difficult thing because you're going to another county. And so you had a change of venue in Orange County to San Diego when the informant situation and how they were breaking people's constitutional rights by putting informants in there, not telling them that, gathering information and different things from people that were getting preferential treatment, money, food, freedom for lying on other people in many instances. And so those cases came down to San Diego. So now we have a Racial Justice Act case, an SB 1437 case that's going to Orange County for a change of venue. And the district attorney did not fight that. Interesting.
Okay.
So we don't know what's going on. We're waiting for a new attorney now.
Yeah.
There's going to be a new prosecutor. The public defender is getting changed. So we are literally in new terrain,
Yeah.
wondering what the heck is happening. My husband's case is in the appellate courts after what they did in his case. We're looking at what are they going to do to make these. Marquell Smith, his case is currently, we're waiting for his case to come up. We have another young man, Mr. Bush, his Justice Act motion was just filed. We're waiting for his. Then we have some of the court decisions that I learned from doing a webinar with Debug about Montgomery and some other Supreme Court decisions. We're waiting for that. Then, of course, we're waiting for Emanuel to get decided. They already did orals. We're waiting for the decision on what is reckless indifference to human life. So we are literally, you and I, and the people are like during slavery, or like during treaties being ratified. We're like during Plessy versus Ferguson. And those are all bad things, but we're literally waiting to see where this uncharted where these legal decisions are going to go and how they're going to be handled. And because we know all of the other cases stunk, we're not super excited. So we have to be ready for other things and other mechanisms, because if the California Supreme Court does not decide fairly the way the Supreme Court of the United States is stacked, we are in big trouble.
Exactly. And I think that that brings me to, and thank you too for highlighting Marquell Smith, because we know that during the tribunal, this was a case that was highlighted and also mentioned, right? Like to really talk about the impact of the racist charging practices by the DA, the sentencing also by the judges, right? So similarly, like you have been kind of mentioning here too, right? Like it sheds light on the legal remedies that can be pursued, whether it's like through the Racial Justice Act to provide potential relief. But, you know, in thinking about stories like that of Marquell Smith and those that you have mentioned too, what do you think the community, or how can the community utilize the analysis that was done by Pillars to advocate for their loved ones who are still incarcerated with LWOP sentences?
So everyone who's part of that 1995 to 2020, 2003, they all have the statistics. They all have that data. And they're working with the public defender's office in some cases on getting some kind of relief, right, in different avenues. Some RJA, some SB 1437. I'm getting call after call after call from people in jail and prison about other years, other district attorneys who are in office. Bonnie Dumanis is one of them. She was between who we have now and Paul Finks, who we did the data on. And so that's guys who are, we're pulling data for them right now. We're finishing pulling data for Summer. We're seeing with Summer other areas of serious inequities in her data. One of them is shooting out of an occupied vehicle. And because we wanted things to make sense. Nobody wants anyone to be murdered. That's why we do peace building. That's why we do conflict resolution, mediation, restorative justice, trauma-informed care. That's why a lot of us do the work we do, because we want everyone's child to be alive and free. But we also don't want people lynched while other people are just punished and able to be rehabilitated. We want the strange fruit of lynching in America to cease. And so when we're looking at things, evading was a charge. You don't think that's a huge charge, but we're seeing that there's racial context in how they're sentencing people for evading. The plea bargains. Why are the plea? I got a guy Aryan swastikas all over his body. He got so much love in our courts, but yet we're fighting for a young black man who is really being harmed. And what they're offering him it's not an evading like he ran. It's just he didn't stop because he was trying to get to a more lit area, and they charged him with evading. So it's really sad. We looked at judges for families. We're seeing that, and this is really interesting, for sales of a narcotic. And we follow the data. Sales of a narcotic, we have a judge who did a lot of sentencing there. And if you were black, you were more likely to go to prison, and you served maybe 100 days more than a similarly situated white defendant. If you were Latinx, you served almost 300 days more than a similarly situated white defendant. So how are you sitting in jail with a white person who has the same exact charges as you do, and you're doing hundreds of days more than they are because you're Latinx? Explain yourself. And so all of these different things. And what we're noticing is that lawyers are utilizing a lot of this before they go to trial or even prelim to let the DA know, hey, this is what's on the table. This doesn't look good. What was that deal you said? And so some of those you're not being able to really see. And that's why we're trying to really boost up our racial justice court watching and get more people that can come in and start looking at that, because we know we're missing so much data in that, in those areas. Prop 36, racial up and down, all these new people getting picked up for hard drugs is how it looked, what the penal code says in San Diego. And it's like, but everybody knows white people do more hard drugs than anyone else. That's qualitatively, we know this. But yet all the people you're arresting are black and brown.
Exactly.
Where are you policing for Prop 36?
Yes, and the data probably looks the same too in like San Mateo County, because we have been doing to like some court watching specifically to try to identify those types of cases. And yeah, it's like there's another story to be able to tell about that for sure. But I wanted to ask, in terms of as we're getting closer to wrap up, right? Like thinking about the future, what would you say is a call to action to the community, or how can we as a community continue to uplift and talk about and have these conversations, right? Yeah, is there anything that you would like to share about that, Laila?
Yes. When you deal with the fabric of this country, how this country was established, and how it has reinvented institutional racism at every juncture of its development, we need to understand that everything we're dealing with is not, oh my gosh, this is a separate instance. No, it's built, it's baked into the cake of America. And understanding that anything that we do, direct action, must acknowledge that changing this is changing the entire country, because it's their system to do what they're doing. And that, therefore, when we deal with direct action and we deal with where we're going next, we have to have that as a component in understanding a teachable moment for everything that we do. And so as we move forward, we do so with strategy, but we also do so understanding that this country will keep reinventing these harsh realities some of us keep feeling, until this country is a different place.
Yep, that is so true. I do want to ask lastly, before we close out for today, Laila, is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like to share?
No, thank you for the work you're doing. We together, from San Diego to the Bay, from Diego to the Bay, as they said, California knows how to party. We have to do this together. Each county building and working together, assisting when we can, for everyone. We're going to be there for each other as we get our loved ones free.
That's right. Thank you.